Anytime you got a congressional leader that recognizes your organization, recognizes your leadership team and your staff in that, and you are one of their sources, you've been successful in your efforts.
Welcome to the Louisiana Farm Bureau podcast, and this is a very special edition as we have the entire Louisiana Farm Bureau Board of Directors Executive Committee here with us. And the great thing is we all went on a trip to Washington, D.C. recently together, and it was a lot of fun. Quick introductions: Marty Woldridge, First Vice President; Birch Pierce, Second Vice President; Richard Fontenot, President; Third Vice President Amelia Kent, and Secretary-Treasurer Mike Melanson, all in one space together. And we actually had to clear out some space at the Twyla Studios to be able to do this. Thanks for joining me on the podcast, y'all.
Great to be here.
Well, first, let's talk a little bit about the whys of going to Washington, D.C., Richard. I mean, farm country is in crisis right now with low commodity prices, high inputs. What was sort of the point that you said, we need to go as leaders in this organization and tell our representatives what we need?
Anytime we face a challenge in agriculture, it's not just one particular area. We throughout the state have different dynamics, and agriculture is facing a crisis in the forefront. And it's across all different sectors throughout our state. And we felt as Farm Bureau leaders that collectively we could be more effective in our messaging as it relates to our congressional leadership there, and provide the regional impacts and how it relates to our particular areas, and share the messaging so that our voice in D.C. is heard.
And I know that y'all all see the effects in your areas. I mean, Birch, you're probably in one of the areas that's hardest hit by this economic crisis that's facing farm country. What are you seeing out there?
Just a lot of uncertainty. I think people are anxious, and obviously want a new farm bill. There's been a lot of talk about the Farm Act, or bridge payment, supplemental payment. I think that again, people are just uncertain. Hoping that something like that gets passed and approved, and kind of gives them a bright spot.
That uncertainty there, I mean, you brought up about the Farm Bill. We're operating right now without a Farm Bill. I don't need to tell that to anyone in this room. But that also is a Farm Bill that was crafted in 2018 using some prices from 2012. Mike, what are you paying for now that's still the same as it was in 2012?
Oh Lord, I couldn't think of anything really. It's scary when you put it in those terms. It really brings it to home, and then you throw in the COVID inflation period in the middle of that, which probably double the input costs on a lot of big prices. Fertilizer, chemicals, labor is going up. All those things have just snowballed since those days. So I don't, anyone depending on a farm bill, even from 18, was not doing well anyway. And now, 6-8 years later, it's going to be really tough.
And that's affecting folks' ability to get financing too, right? I mean, you have a personal story you can share.
Well, not so much a personal story, but what we've seen in our area is we're starting to see lenders pull out of row crop farming, to be more specific about it. And that's as he called it, uncertainty. But the basic foundations of our society, from our government and whatnot, one of them should be us being concerned about our food supply. And here we are. We have just kicked the can in Washington for so many years now. Whereas one of the things that they should be nailing down from the get-go to make sure that our country is properly fed and our farmers are able to do what they need to do to feed this country.
And that's part of food security and national security as well. I mean,
right.
That was one of the messages I know you brought up when we were in meetings.
Well, that point actually goes back to some of our young farmers and ranchers visits years ago when Congressman Ralph Abraham was a representative, and that was his saying, I come from farm country, and when we talk about national security, when we talk about farm security, really that is a question of national security, and our farmers and ranchers' boots on the ground are our thin green line to national security. So the commodity prices and row crop crisis that we're experiencing in farm country right now really very quickly becomes a rural economic crisis, in addition to this national security issue relative to our food production.
So you brought up about the uncertainty in not having a farm bill, not allowing for, or some bankers are choosing not to issue loans because of that uncertainty. Is a new farm bill enough?
It would be if it'd be fiscally responsible and up to date and accurate, if you will. Unfortunately, the operation and farm bill we've been under, even with the extension, the paper was really not worth the financial safety net that our lenders needed for us to go into a 2025 crop. If we can make those equitable adjustments and be actuarially sound, if you will, then I think we have something we can take to a lender and get a crop production in 2025. Unfortunately, some sectors, as we talked to, we have a supplemental issue as relates to historical non-performance of the Farm Bill. So the Farm Act is one of those supplemental bridge payments, as he mentioned, that Representative Letlow and some other constituents in our Mississippi delegation there as well is trying to provide some of those bridge payments to allow producers to get into 2025. Then the lenders using a more equitable Farm Bill that has accurate numbers, raising PLC rates and things of that nature. So these lenders can take these producers in and make a crop for 2025.
The reality is, if we pass the Farm Bill tomorrow, it still won't take effect until upwards of a year from now. And the commodity crisis is right now. We need something now because we did not get a Farm Bill passed a year ago, and the extension also expired.
And I know the Farm Act that was introduced by Trent Kelly of Mississippi. You have co-sponsors, including Congresswoman Julia Letlow of Louisiana's 5th District and then Clay Higgins from Louisiana's 3rd District. But there has also been another measure introduced recently that would provide some disaster assistance and also would probably utilize the same funding there. What are y'all's thoughts on something other than the Farm Act at this point?
You know, they got a lot of different plans, Mike. I know you were looking at some stuff earlier today.
Anything's better than nothing. And even the author of the Farm Act bill felt that Representative Kelly from Mississippi felt that something's better than nothing. But if the right folks are putting it together, you know, you would trust that it would help the correct sector. You know, a lot of this work was done in Louisiana. It's a net loss per acre per crop an average across the U.S. So the Farm Act works. Something similar to that would probably be okay. If it's tied to disaster, I think Louisiana and the South should be okay with those things. There's a lot of unknown. I guess the light at the end of the tunnel is things are moving forward, and hopefully we can, you know, our leaders can steer it in a direction that helps our farmers, especially in Louisiana.
Well, I know under the Farm Act, once passed, they have 90 days. Congress would have 90 days. USDA would have 90 days to disperse those funds from CCC, would be the source. I guess at this late in the game, is 90 days fast enough?
I think it would be if it is passed. They can go on and make that declaration or announcement. Farmers can take those numbers to their bankers. They can use that to work on loans for next year or shore up debt from this year. But the Farm Act, the framework is they talk to FSA. They think this is something they can do in a very timely manner. They think it's a very efficient tool, and there's no new money in it. It's all CCC funds that are already there and have been approved. So again, that's what needs to happen.
We've kind of tiptoed a little bit about the trip, but let's talk about the trip itself. I mean, day one when we got over there to the offices, I'm trying to remember, who was the first one we visited?
We were in Cassidy's office with his staff.
Yes.
Yep.
What was that like?
Well, I mean, of course, it's a pretty interesting time to be in Washington. A lot going on.
Don't say what was going on there, Marty?
Well, I think by the time that we were in Cassidy's office, all the good Republicans were somewhere with some guy named Trump about that time. He had just flown into town before he met with Biden. But, again, we're there. They're trying to get their feet on the ground with the new administration coming. A lot of cabinet picks, a lot of things going on. But what a great time for us to go to see some fresh air. There's new ideas floating around. What a great time for us to be together, for us to represent the people of our state, our agricultural producers, our ag membership. It's an interesting group we've got here. We pretty much touch every region of the state. We pretty much touch every commodity that's produced in the state. And we're able to go up there and tell that story for our membership. That's the most important work we can do.
And what was the reception like?
Very well received. It's a tough message that we were taking with us, but we have great relationships with our entire delegation, and to be able to meet with either the staff, of course, the members have their obligations too, but for the most part, we met with more members. I had the opportunity to meet with members more often than just staff. But staff and members alike are supporters of Louisiana agriculture across all of the commodities. And we've been having to communicate our challenges for the last several years. Last year, we were talking about drought, and some of that story has permeated into this year as well, which very quickly turned into hurricane challenges as well. So Marty touched on all of our representation across all of the commodities and all over the state. And that's what's so beautiful about Farm Bureau is we represent all of the commodities and we represent all of our fellow producers, regardless of what we individually grow and where we're from.
One thing I will say, the timing of the trip was interesting because obviously we want a farm bill, we want the Farm Act, but the big message was, we're here after the election. We don't want to get lost in the transition from, one presidency to the next. And they've got a few days left here in the 118th Congress to, take care of some business. And, we want to make sure they, hear us.
Do you think they heard you?
No, absolutely. And one thing I would say that, they absolutely knew who Louisiana Farm Bureau was. It just shows that the work that the staff's put in, the work that each of us have put in through Young Farmers and Ranchers, through fly-ins, a lot of us had already had those relationships, and it was good to kind of see that network in play.
I think it's very important to note also it's the work that our predecessors have done, the stature that Louisiana Farm Bureau has when we go to Washington. So it's really great to be able to continue that work after so many years of this organization.
Well, and I'd say a bonus too was we were eating lunch and ran into Cleo Field. So we were in the transition process between election and the new Congress. And we have one outgoing congressman from the 6th, and we have someone coming in. And to be able to visit with Cleo Fields in a cafe, just because we happened to run into him, and hey, we look forward to working with you in the future. Things like that or running into G.T. Thompson and getting to go to the balcony of the Ag Committee. Those things we can't necessarily plan, but are just as valuable as the scheduled visits.
It was very interesting as we went from office to office, and we learned more information about where each staff was, or where each individual congressman was, or a senator for that matter, and then carrying that information into the next office because they trusted our message. And we just kept building it. And I think we were informing their staff as because they asked us as many questions as we were asking of them. And it's pretty unique that this group got to travel together and go to D.C. on a fly-in, because it's even though Farm Bureau covers all commodities, it's hard for us as a group to go for one specific commodity but when we can do Farm Bill or maybe labor would be the only other opportunity for us to work together. So it was, and being that group and carrying the cloud of Farm Bureau, and like I said, what was set up before us, because it's really not us that have created that brand, but folks they were really in tune to what we were saying, but they really were quizzing us. It was just amazing how much they quizzed us about what was going on in other offices. And the more we'd share, the more the message just continued to grow. And it was very enlightening. And like I said, our timing was perfect. Things were in a state of flux. And I think they were looking for maybe a calming, unified message, and we were able to deliver it. So,
it was definitely exciting times. And with new administrations coming in and the turnover, Amelia, you touched on that. And just the fact that we were there collectively just reassured what we do as an organization. And like Marty said, our predecessors have set a lot of groundwork. Our staff has done a lot of outreach with their staff and coordinating activities outside of just scheduling our visits. I mean, we are the voice of Louisiana agriculture, but at the same time, our staff is the resource of agriculture, whether it be in Washington, D.C. or Baton Rouge or wherever it is. We have the economists, we have the data, we have the resources that help connect the dots to provide actuarially sound data as we build these farm bills and these farm acts and work on different topics as it relates to agriculture. We have to be a unified voice, and we were that collectively as a group there that day. And like Mike said, the staffers and everyone was really excited when we got there because they saw progress, they saw opportunity, they saw their friends, and we are their friends when we go there. We're their friends when they come here and visit within the district. And we represent geographically a very dynamic portion of the state. So in that, we each had relationships and networks. And at the end of the day, those networks are what get you to the next level. Those networks allow you to have the success stories and carry the message and be as effective as we are being the voice of agriculture.
Yeah, there was more than one staffer there who brought up going on a farm tour while they were back in district. How much did that pay dividends for this trip?
I had the opportunity to, G.T. Thompson, we said we met with him in the hall, and I had the opportunity to take some of his staff on some combines and cut some rice. And I know some other staffers visited with different folks with your department, the PR department, went throughout the state. Mike and them had a sugar symposium where they took a bunch of legislative folks a couple of weeks prior and did a leadership deal. I know Birch has been part of some of the other stuff they've done. So anytime that we can interact with staff and put boots on the ground, I love that cliche. Boots on the ground makes people understand what we do and why we do it, and it helps articulate that story that they can share with their leader, whoever it may be, from a staffer perspective, and put moral to the story and understand the dynamics. And anytime you can put a story behind it, you have content and you have something that leaves an impression long term.
But overall, what we're really doing is building relationships.
Yeah.
Not only are we there to lean on them, because we need them to move this legislation forward immediately, and we're trying to show them the importance of it, but we're furthering those relationships so that they can lean on us, like you're talking about, for the information, for the real world knowledge of how this is going to affect these rural communities, what it could do to our state. I think it's so important for us to drop back and talk about, if we lose something here, if we don't get this crop in the ground, is the infrastructure going to stay in that little town that supports those farmers and the tractor dealership and the seed and so on and so forth? We can't screw this up. We've got to move this forward ASAP.
Y'all have each brought up in one way or another the clout of Louisiana Farm Bureau, the name, the I guess what's the word I'm looking for? The confidence, the reputation that the organization has. I can tell you now, and I'm gonna grab my phone for a moment because I want to play y'all a little clip. But before I play it, one time I was interviewing Congressman Clay Higgins. And we all know that Congressman Clay Higgins will speak whatever's on his mind at the moment, no matter what. I was in the middle of the interview with him and he said, Louisiana Farm Bureau, patriots to the highest order. I mean, that tells me what he thinks of this organization. And I can tell you now, his staff is in constant communication with our public policy and commodity folks. The same can be said for Representative Julia Letlow. Her staff works very closely with all of us here at Louisiana Farm Bureau. I want to play y'all. Y'all were in another room when I interviewed Congresswoman Letlow, and this is what she had to say about Louisiana Farm Bureau.
As always, it's so great to be with the Farm Bureau with President Fontenot, who comes up here regularly to help me understand the issues that are going on in Louisiana. They've been so kind and warm to me since day one. I'm on year 4 now, definitely still not an expert. I need to hear from the Farm Bureau to know that how I can be a better champion for them up here in Washington.
What's your reaction?
Oh, I love it. I'm a constituent of Congresswoman Letlow, and I have an existing working relationship with her chief of staff. Last year, when we were in the middle of fighting the drought, I worked with a former staffer of hers, and on our visit, got to meet his successor. And I mean, even last week, after we'd gotten back from D.C., the new staffer in Ag LA called me just so we could have a follow-up and actually just establish that relationship and stay in contact, and open invite for a farm visit whenever they come back into town. But to be able to have that working relationship and know that she went to bat for us a year ago, and she worked with Congressman Kelly on the Farm Act right now, she is such a champion of agriculture.
You know, anytime you got a congressional leader that recognizes your organization, recognizes your leadership team and your staff in that, and you are one of their sources, you've been successful in your efforts. And that's what we're trying to do as Farm Bureau, is be that source, be the voice, be that opportunity. If they need help, we're there, whether it be in person, whether it be on the phone, whether it be resources. But at the end of the day, because we're just representatives. I mean, this is not me. I mean, and it's not Burge, it's not Marty. We represent 147,000 other Farm Bureau members in this state, and we're going to do that to the best of our ability and our respective commodities along the way. We have the stories, and when you have congressional leadership recognizing that we are the source as it relates to agriculture, we are the source to provide them viable information. That's when I believe you've supported a successful brand and effort in your endeavors, if you will.
I'd just like to say also, she's my congresswoman, and she's wonderful. I mean, she is a great voice for Louisiana ag and for U.S. ag as far as that goes. But I also want to note that we were able to meet with all the offices, and they were all very receptive, and they're very in tune with what's going on and what our plight is here in the state in regards to agriculture. And for that, I'm very thankful for them and for Louisiana Farm Bureau. And as Marty said, the work of our predecessors and making sure that groundwork's there.
And let's also talk about the clout that the Louisiana delegation has now. Your congressman is Speaker of the House.
He is, and I had the fortunate opportunity to know him before he even got elected to Congress, and took him on farm tours back in the day and showed him what crawfish was on the southern tip of his district early on. And to where he's at today, it just, I'm filled with pride, and because he's done it with integrity and hard work all the way through. And between he and Majority, Scalise and those guys, Louisiana is in a really positive seat. And as Burge said, they were receptive to all of us as we went and traveled the Hill. They understand Louisiana's plight. They understand the agriculture issues. They understand Farm Bureau. They know we're here. And we're trying to give them the efforts and the ammunition to move forward and work with their colleagues across the aisle and down the aisle to understand the plight we're in and the need that we need to get the Farm Bill and the Farm Act move forward.
And I've seen some results already from that visit. I mean, there's a certain air of optimism concerning the Farm Act. There's also, just this week, Congressman Troy Carter had posted a letter concerning sustainable ag fuels. And I really think that was the meeting with Zach that led to that. So having those relationships, but what is your mood? What do you think? How are you feeling now that we're back and we've had a little time to take a breath?
Well, I think, going up, we're not sure what to expect. We're not sure what, no one knew what the atmosphere was going to be like. We set this trip up before the election. So, but I quickly learned that it didn't matter. The election results what we were trying to get accomplished was not dependent on the election results. We heard it from both sides of the aisle. We heard it from Cleo Fields and Congressman Carter. We heard it in Senator Cassidy's office. But we heard the bipartisanship of agriculture, and especially Louisiana, and the importance of Louisiana as being part of the discussion. We have Congressman Scalise and as majority leader. I mean, when we meet up with someone, we met with G.T. Thompson in the basement basically, and to ask for a picture, and we got a private 10-minute meeting with him in his office as Amelia, and I'm not sure if that's because we were the Louisiana Farm Bureau or we were Farm Bureau in general, just a group of farmers, because he looked like a regular guy. But he really wanted to know where we thought things were as much as we were quizzing him. And so I saw a lot of optimism. I'm not sure it was only because of the election. I think it was just the message has been going around Washington that agriculture's taking a back seat for a while, and it's time to move them up to the front of the line and fix rural America and fix ag. And I'm hoping that we had a little part of that. We saw a lot of other farm bureaus out there. I know Texas was there, Mississippi was traveling. So the message, even though we weren't, this was not a coordinated fly-in, is everybody saw a need and went to D.C. And I always feel a lot of times when I've been on commodity trips before, you ask for folks' help, and you know they're not going to give it to you, but you got to walk in that office anyway. And obviously we went to our friends, but not everyone in there was our friend. Not every room we went to, not every staffer knew what we wanted. But I was encouraged by hopefully a new direction in D.C. at least towards ag. I'm not sure politics will ever change there, but hopefully it doesn't carry into like I said, into Farm Bureau, and I think we crossed the aisle well, and I think that'll carry us a long way. So I'm very optimistic.
Marty, I mean, what were your feelings after coming back?
Oh, so it's been a couple of years since I've had the opportunity to go up. So it was good to be back and walking the hill, as we say, and knocking on those doors. I think we're headed in the right direction. I feel privileged to be able to deliver the message of how important agriculture is to the country as a whole, to the whole population. I really hope that that message is shared from those congressional offices to the other members of Congress, urban areas, rural areas, inner city, whatever, whoever you represent. We need y'all and y'all need us. And we need to look at, as Amelia said a minute ago, it's national security. It's just as important as the national defense. It's part of it. It's part of the whole dang picture. We've got to feed this country. We've got to have food security. So we've got to pass the legislation to get it done. And
we can't do it by ourselves.
No.
We're just, like I said earlier, we representatives of Louisiana Farm Bureau, 147,000. We had a lot of other constituents from other farm bureaus there. But at the end of the day, we need 147,000 folks to call the congressional folks and say, hey, we need your help. We need to get this moved forward. We got different opportunities to do that. I think we'll talk about those later. But at the end of the day, we're talking on your behalf, but we need you. We need them to talk too. I got 3,200 members in my parish and Farm Bureau members. I need all 3,200 of those to pick up the phone and call and say, we need this for our parish, because our rural communities are the ones that are going to be suffered. You know that all too well. You live in that central part, north part of the state, and you take agriculture out of that sector, and it's a demise to a lot of small rural communities and within Louisiana. And I think those dynamics and messages are what's important. But we can't do it alone. We got to have help. We got to get our various leadership team around the state and different parishes, but we need all the members engaged. We need all folks to help us in this process.
That's 100% correct. I'll jump right back in. 100% correct, because just because we flew to Washington last week and spent a couple of days did what we did is not enough. We can't stop until this is done.
Yeah. We open the door. We need everyone's help to finish pushing the door open and making sure that this makes it to the finish line.
The Hill is a very busy place. And I mean, anyone who's been in a congressional office knows you see typically 15-minute meeting windows. The phones are ringing off the hook. The door is a revolving door of people in and out. So unless we bring issues to their attention, they don't know that it may be an issue. Mike and I were recently at a meeting in which someone was talking about the staffers being really intelligent, but not necessarily, maybe being sheltered from the things that we live day in and day out, boots on the ground. And how, for instance, on the Sugarcane League staffer visits, a staffer not knowing what stubble meant. And the man speaking said, no, not stubble like face stubble, but stubble as in sugarcane rootstock. And we have to use a little less farmer lingo and be a lot more maybe basic and standard in our language to these staffers, just so they can understand. I've historically told a story about having gone to college with a lot of really intelligent people who genuinely believe the food chain starts at the grocery store. So that is our need as farmers and ranchers, to stand up and speak up and communicate our challenges. And especially in a time like this, time is of the essence. But I mean, we've laid the groundwork with the Hill visits and the relationships we have. Our staff has done a great job, but we've also been trying to push the voter voice messaging.
I would agree with that. I think we went, lay the groundwork, but, to educate. We told our story. We told, the issues we were facing, but, at the end of each one of those meetings, we said, hey, if you got an issue, if there's something you don't understand, please pick up the phone, call us, call the staff here at the office. But we want to help you understand and make the decision that you're comfortable making at the end of the day.
Be a resource to them, yeah. And that's I came out of each of those meetings hearing y'all say that and thinking of how important that is. Richard, you mentioned that we have 147,000 members. How is it that these members can get engaged? How difficult is that? Because I think that it might be just like a couple of clicks.
Yeah, and thanks to your department, we've had the opportunity to create a venue, and you're going to probably see it on the end of this podcast at some form, I imagine. But we have a tool called Voter Voice, and in that tool you can register. There's probably be a QR code involved in there where you can click on that. Do simple sign in, a couple of information, enter the document there, and then you can engage, and you can let your congressional leadership know, and it'll sign a message to that leadership of what we're trying to do at this point in time, which is a farm bill, an equitable farm bill, as well as a Farm Act. And so the Voter Voice is a tool that we use and that all our membership can use, and very easily click that QR code and put your information in, and you can reach out and send information to your legislative leadership on your feelings and your support for Louisiana agriculture.
Yeah, it's so easy that a caveman could do it, because I did it at least once or twice, and it goes straight to both your senators and your congressman based on the address you enter and all of that. Okay, roll call. Who did it?
I have.
I've done it twice.
I've done it twice.
I have.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times.
There we go. That's what we need to hear.
Have you shared it? Have you put it out there? Have you helped put it out there? That's another job we've got to get done.
So we got different tools we're going to try to use, and I'm going to reach out and ask all those out there that hear this podcast or might see the podcast. We're going to, as the messaging changes and the dynamics change, please engage. I said I did it twice, but we had 2 different messages. Early on, we had a particular focus we were working on, and that message kind of evolved into where we needed to be next and push that next issue. So we have to stay engaged throughout the process, i.e. get to the finish line. And these are the tools that we have available. And with your This Week in Louisiana Agriculture show, we're going to share those topics and those availability, explain a little bit more how to use those sources to engage and to interact so we can carry agriculture to the next level.
Yeah, and you talked about the message changing. This podcast, even within this podcast, we talked about how the message has changed from we need a farm bill now to we need supplemental assistance now. That's a major shift in that messaging. So just to wrap things up, I want to thank you all for joining me on the podcast. It's a real cool thing to finally get all 5 members of the exec committee here. So Marty Woldridge, Birch Pierce, Richard Fontenot, Mike Melosa, Amelia Kent, thanks so much for joining me on the Louisiana Farm Bureau podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it. It's been fun.
We thank you as well for tuning into the podcast. If you heard something that was of interest to you, like one of the websites we talked about or some of the stories we've done prior about the Farm Bill and the Farm Act, we'll have all of those in the show notes. And be sure to like it on Facebook if you see it there. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube if you're watching it there. And be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get podcasts. For the Louisiana Farm Bureau podcast, I'm Avery Davidson. Thank you for joining us.